Morning. I'm Sadia Shaukat. I welcome to all of you in the first episode of the webinar for the month of July. This episode is based on responsive learning during COVID-19. Dear audience, I hope you will respect the protocols of the webinar. Please use the chat box for your questions and the comments. This webinar is being recorded and presented through live stream that you can find through the sources of social media of the University of Education. Dear audience, I'm delighted to introduce you with Dr. Rabika Folks, who is a professor of education and director of the Advanced Professional Teacher Development and International Education in the College of Education and Human Development in the George Mason University. Dr. Rabika is an active researcher with over 100 publications and a co-authored book in over 200 scholarly presentations and teacher professional development workshops conducted in national and international context. With a focus on social justice, equity, access to education, her research centers on educational, professional development, and critical reflection, second language acquisition research in the global settings, and international mindedness. She has been recognized by the French government and awarded prestigious award for her service to education in France, and she was honored in 2010 by her university with the Mason Excellence in the Teaching Award. Dr. Folks has held several international grants and directed multiple international teacher education professional development programs. Very warm welcome, Dr. Rabika, and thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sadia, and welcome to those of you who are able to be with us this evening in my time, tomorrow morning your time. We are also very happy that this is going to be recorded so that you can share it with whomever might be interested in watching. When Dr. Sadia contacted me, she wanted us to continue on in a dialogue about education during our time of COVID. And as we begin to see the end of it and yet recognize that there's a resurgence, it dawned on me that we want to continue in our learning as faculty and in our work with students during this time in order to achieve responsive learning and engagement by our students. So that is the title of my webinar with you today, Achieving Responsive Learning and Engaging Learners Actively in Post-COVID University Settings. And I'm being aspirational as I say post-COVID, but COVID-19 does continue to have an impact on us, on our students, and on their learning. And whether our classes are face-to-face, returning to that mode, whether some of our classes are fully online, or whether they're offered in a hybrid format, what might some of the research that is emerging from our COVID experience, what is this research helping us and telling us that we might be doing better in the work that we do? And a question I might want to ask, and you may ask yourselves as well, should I be looking for my instruction to return to the way things were before? I would hope not. I would hope that we would be learning and adding new dimensions to what we have already done well, but we will do better. And that is to think about what engaged learning might mean for us and for our students, and particularly for you and your students there at the University of Education. So let's consider some new possibilities. You might be working and teaching in the summer session. For us, at our university in Fairfax, Virginia, we do have summer session going on, but we're soon to end that. And we'll take a small break in August before we return toward the end of August for fall. So I thought I would think of ourselves as learning from the past and moving to new practices in the fall. So despite the challenges, despite the modes of delivery or what other situations we may have encountered, we are going to be working this upcoming academic year through some enhanced lenses. We have learned a lot. What might these enhanced lenses look like? There is research that's emerging that is talking about greater faculty and learner engagement. And this has happened because of necessity. This has happened because of a lot of interactive feedback online with our students. And in many cases, faculty are reporting that they have discovered some new personal connections with their students because through Zoom or through other online means, we have given that individual attention, we have made these personal connections and have come to speak with students in ways that perhaps we might not have done automatically in face-to-face sessions. I will also say that there have been challenges, and I do know that both in the US and in Pakistan and in other areas of the world, COVID-19 forcing us into online settings has not always resulted in positive learning for our students. So we want to take these challenges and we want to learn from them. We want to build on the positive things that we've learned, but we also want to look at aspects of equity and access and infuse our own educational practice with that new knowledge and with those new lenses. So now it's your turn. I want you to take a moment and think about what your greatest learning was as an educator during COVID. And if I might ask Dr. Sadia to monitor the chat box for a moment, if you would like to type your response to that question in the chat box to share a little. And I am not able to see you because of the format of my screen, but if you do raise your hand, Dr. Sadia will be able to call on you. I would love for you to feel free to share your thoughts.
So, dear faculty and the students, if you have any comment or if you would like to say something about your experience and your teaching, learning experience, student engagement, and as a result of this learning, whatever you have learned or any new thing that you discovered during this learning process, would you like to share with Dr. Radhika? Yes, please, Dr. Kutsia. You can directly ask or you can directly respond. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sadia. Thank you, Dr. Fox. It's a very interesting topic you are talking about. Thank you thank you for talking about the post-COVID situation. So, as far as your question is concerned, the most important learning for me as a teacher educator is that our current system of education, global system of education, is not sustainable. During COVID situation, all other systems carried on work, not all other, many of other systems carried on working. For example, there was no stop in stock exchange. There was no crash in banking system. Banks kept operating. Everything was online. Even online shopping was going on. But there was a problem in education. Our education systems were not updated the way the industry had been updated. So I have learned that We need to we need to work on our education system. As a teacher, I need to equip myself with the use of technology. I should be a very good user of educational technology. Blend the concept of blended learning and digital learning has been there for so many years actually, but during COVID, I learned that many universities, particularly in Pakistan, they stopped, they gave summer break to the students in the month of March because their systems were not ready. And when it came to teaching, I didn't know how to use Zoom, how to use Meet. Now these applications look very simple. But when we were asked to use Google Hangouts, I was so scared. I didn't know. By the way, I'm the one who had worked in virtual university as well. I had recorded lessons, but these applications were very new to me. So I had to put in a lot of effort to learn, and my university actually facilitated us. So now, being a teacher educator, I'm very much convinced that I should understand that the future is unpredictable. Anything can happen. We need to keep learning, and the age is technological age. I should be equipping myself with the new digital skills. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that was a tremendous piece of learning and also a very accurate depiction. We were all stopped in our tracks. I did have earlier a file with some resources in it that perhaps Dr. Sadia still has. And Dr. Sadia, you are welcome to share that broadly with some added online resources to enhance teaching. So I'm going to continue on. I'll bet that all of us felt that struggle, but also the triumph of beginning to feel more confident in the online domain. I know our faculty have felt the same way, and I certainly have as well. One thing that I certainly have also learned is that we need to invite our students to engage in interactive learning with us. And so one of the big pieces of learning is that we do have to set the stage. We do, and our universities do, need to help provide these platforms for us to use in the teaching and learning process. However, we have to level that playing field. We have to engage our students and not have the teaching and learning process be one directional. We need to make it bi-directional. So some of the things that have enhanced this approach to help students become more engaged, and this is both online and face-to-face. My faculty and I have talked about the importance of now starting each class with a personal connection or a quick check-in that gets them set up emotionally to tune in to learning. It takes a long time for them to sit and learn with their screen in front of them. If we bring them into the process, it's important. You'll notice I just used the chat function. And so in my online classes, I always stop and have a moment for this is your turn, or I'd like you to reflect on that and share a thought in the chat box. I continually do that because I want my students to be with me, but I also want to know what they're thinking. If I am in a face-to-face space, I ask my students, I stop and I ask them, where is everybody's, what are we thinking about right now? Someone give me, this group over here, give me two words that describe something we've just talked about. This group over here, do that, because I want to see their eyes. I want them with me. I do also ask that my class kindly keep their cameras on, because I feel as if I'm talking to a void if I can't see the faces of my students. So that's something that may seem like a small thing, but it's a huge thing when we think about the eye contact that we like to maintain in face-to-face classes. Once we cross over that threshold, students start to see, oh, I can talk to my professor. I can ask a question. I can put my question in the chat box. There are many things that I can do to show my professor that I'm with her, I'm with him, or I have a question and I hope we can answer it. So that's a very important piece. I usually ask an essential question at the outset of class. I want to pose a question that my students will be able to answer by the end. And then 5 minutes before the end of my class period, I stop and I either do a review preview, or I do something that I call drop everything and reflect. So that dear moment is how I bring that essential question back to the end, and I turn it around to the students, and I want to hear what their response to that is as the result of class. That helps me stay in touch with my students, and it helps my students stay in my head as well. When I'm in an online setting, I do use breakout rooms. Now, we use Zoom at George Mason, and it is easy for me to put them into breakout rooms. When I do that, I make sure I have a leader, or that they select their own leader, and that they record the responses. When the breakout room time is over, and I put the timer on and I let them know when they have a minute left, we bring it back to whole group, and then we share what those responses are. That keeps students engaged. I do a very similar thing in face-to-face classes. I just divide them into small groups, and I'll bet you do that as well.
Dr. Rabika, would you mind to please enlarge your slides, the PowerPoint?
Enlarge them.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I see, Dr. Sadia, is my full screen in front of me. Should I stop sharing and do something else?
No. Um, yeah, I don't know, but my IT staff was just saying.
Okay, I have stopped sharing. Are you not able to see my screen?
No.
Huh. Okay, I'll select a window. Okay. So it's gone back to full screen mode, but it's not in slideshow. Are you able to show my PowerPoint in another way?
Yeah, that's okay. So are you presenting the first slide, or you are just moving? Because we can just see the first slide, the title.
No. Okay, so I've gone all the way through to slide. I finished slide 5, and I was just going to slide 6.
Okay, because yeah, your presentation was not in the slide mode. So
Well, it is on my screen, so that's why I cannot see any of you in this particular mode. So,
yeah, that's okay. We just carry on.
how shall we proceed?
Wasim,
How should we proceed here?
Wasim.
Okay, I have done that. Okay, do you see the slide that says productive practices for greater student engagement?
Yes, I can.
Okay, that is showing now, and it wasn't showing before?
Yeah.
Oh, how interesting. Okay, well, we learn something all the time. We do not use this platform at Mason. So there you go. When we talk about engaging with our audience, we do have to get used to some of these platforms. So thank you for your help with this. So continuing on with this idea of using productive practices for greater student engagement, hopefully many of you use formative assessment practices. And because I can't see your faces, what I would ask people to do in my class is, if you use formative assessment practices, give me a thumbs up. So maybe Dr. Sadia can look for me.
Yes,
Is
we
this
are. Yeah, we are doing this. Dr. Karim, would you like to say something, or anyone else? Would you like to say something? Yes, we are using the formative assessment. We prepare some mock tests, sometime quizzes, and the some other activities to just assess the knowledge of the students. So yeah, that works very well. So in that way, we can just determine the students are with us and they are responding and they are attending the lectures. So Google Classroom actually is a wonderful evidence of their performance and some other activities assessment.
yes?
Yes.
Yes, it certainly is. And we've found here that by using these formative assessment practices, they lead to much more mastery learning than focusing on grades, which is wonderful. In a previous webinar, I talked a little bit about the comments that we can make formatively on their drafts or on their work, about a comment that we give a compliment, and we talk about what they need to do to improve. So a glows and grows type of comment. Comments like, here are some accomplished areas that you have done a good job on. Also, now this part needs more attention. And then you need to be very clear about what that more attention does mean for you. I also, and we, call for a response from my students so that feedback doesn't just land somewhere and be forgotten. We want feedback to be engaging with them. So I like to call for a response, and I usually ask them to get back to me by a certain date or day. So I ask them to enhance a part of a project, and I also ask them if they understand what I'm asking them to do. I ask them to share, I share with them more about what I see and what I would like to see more of in order for them to achieve the highest level possible. I ask them also to tell me what they think will improve their product. And then I also ask them to tell me how they're going to do it. And so that also grabs students and helps them see that it really does matter what they do, and that I'm not just merely telling them you need to improve, but I'm giving them scaffolds to get there. I've just changed screens. So are you now able to see the one that says use rubrics?
No.
Okay, so I'm not sure what that. So I have advanced my screen and it says use rubrics. And so Dr. Sadia, what should I do in order to be able to have this screen be seen?
Wasim, would you like to say something? Dr. Rabika is moving.
Okay. Okay, so this was productive practices. I am using the arrow key and I have advanced to use rubrics. Are you able to see that? Okay. I don't know how else to advance it. Let's see. Does that go to use rubrics if I use that way? Okay, so in this mode of presentation, the only thing I am able to see is my screen. So perhaps I should exit. Okay, and I'm not sure how to even do that. I have lost all ability to have any controls. I'm not quite sure how to get back to that mode where I was able to.
Yes, we can see now. We can see the rubric for the fall. Yes, use rubrics. We can see.
Okay. So I am not in slideshow mode. I'm just in, maybe this works better if I'm just in the regular mode with my slides on the side.
That's okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, please.
All right. I still am not able to see you, but if you can see this is fine. All right. So my apologies. So one of the things that we do is use rubrics. And do you all enjoy using rubrics? Have you begun to use them a lot in your classes?
Well, since this is a new thing for us during the COVID-19 pandemic, but we have learned a lot, and we started to create some rubrics for the activities, and we just need some expertise and the guidance and the counseling and how to do that further. But we designed something, the background information and the variables construct information. So in that way, yeah, we learned this technique that how we can provide the justification about the responses of the students,
Excellent.
answers, and they can be satisfied in that way, because sometimes they ask, well, whatever we are writing, what is the good way to present the information? Yeah, and they get curious, and because during the pandemic, they were just more concerned about their assessment and the marks and the grading. So we provided them a ground that whatever you are doing, it's wonderful. So look at these things. If you provide this information in your responses, and the answers of the questions in the activities as well. So you are doing a wonderful job. And we provide that information in the Google Classroom as well. So,
Good.
and they're very responsive, they are getting responsive with the passage of the time. That's a wonderful thing. Yeah. Dr. Kutz, yeah, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sadhya. So I would like to share my experience. So I have been involved in pre-service teachers training since 2004 for 17 years. So I'm very much familiar with rubrics, and I have been using rubrics since 2004. And the additional to rubrics, I would like to mention that what I learned as a teacher educator during pandemic was that, like, I used to give rubrics to the students and used to explain the assessment task. Rubrics always served as a criteria for assessing the students, and they knew on what scale we are going to assess them. I used to provide guidance notes as well. But during the pandemic, I learned that there was less oral guidance. As a result, I learned to provide more and more guidance in written form to my students. I, I was not spoon feeding them at all by providing a very much detailed guidance, but I learned that by providing detailed guidance notes, students' output tremendously improved. So that is what I learned, that rubrics should be detailed enough, that's fine, but at the same time, we need to guide students, particularly when they are not in face-to-face interaction. So that is an additional learning for me during the pandemic. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, I totally agree with everything you have just
Students, particularly
shared
when
with
they
us.
are not in face-to-face
Rubrics
interaction.
and by refining them,
that-
and I refine them every time I teach a course, and I work with my students to also, our pre-service teachers, to create rubrics that they try out and that then they refine. So one of the big things is working out what each level of the rubric is going to entail. So I'll show you one of the rubrics that I use for one of my courses on one of my next slides. And Dr. Sadia, I'm sure you'll have to, you will be able to share this PowerPoint and people will be able to look at this because I'm sure that in a moment they won't be able to read the words. But I always ask my students to aim for the highest level. And that is something that puts the power in them. They want to perform and they want to do their very best. I also have found that rubrics help me because they help to guide when I am reading a paper. I look at how, and I fill out the rubric to let them know where they fall within that rubric for all of the aspects of it. So I use rubrics in all my courses and I use them for all of my assignments. That didn't happen overnight. I started long ago, but I continue to add to it and to refine it. Each of the rubrics, whether it's for an overall course, with regard to overarching expectations or for a singular assignment, they all convey the expectations of that task. So I do update the rubrics at each semester based on student feedback and on the student products. And I actually ask them to let me know if what I have designed for my rubric was helpful to them. So this is the one that's going to be small on your screen, but you'll see there that I have 4 levels: exemplary, very good, emergent to good, and unsatisfactory. And my goal is to never have anyone be unsatisfactory or in that good category. But sometimes there are certain aspects of an assignment that might fall there. But the overall goal is to have them be where that red arrow is pointing, where we aim for what is in the highest level with regard to, in this particular assignment, it's for a doctoral course. Did they provide a rationale or a justification for the study they were conducting? Did they relate to the literature and the research that has been read in class? So all of those things define where the aspects of the assignment that we would like to see. I do look at language and writing, and I do ask them to really monitor and read and look for errors in grammar and spelling. And again, aiming for this top level. And then at the very end, I ask them to reflect on their own work and on the process and the product development that they have just provided. And that's also a really wonderful window into what the students have produced and come up with at the end. Are there any questions as we go on to this using feedback? But I do use rubrics as the basis for a lot of my feedback.
Dr. Fox, regarding designing the rubrics for every lesson activity, that takes time. How are you managing it, and how we can get some hands-on information regarding designing some rubrics? Is there any useful source would you like to share with us?
So I would say to work with a partner if there is someone who works along with you, teaching the same course or having a similar assignment. I would start with maybe one rubric per class instead of a rubric for every single assignment, because that gets to be a little bit too onerous as a task is concerned. But we have what we call performance assessments or major assignments for a class. Those major assignments are the ones I would start with first. I'd be happy to do another session on working and creating rubrics if you'd like to sometime. It really is its own topic, and coming up with those performance indicators is a little bit of a learning curve, but once you have it, it becomes a whole lot easier.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Of course. So in addition to rubrics, if we also use feedback student to student and among classmates. So if you have a rubric for an assignment, classmates can pair up and read one another's assignments and help each other see where they fall on that rubric. It's really fascinating as they become critical friends for one another. So students can give peer feedback. I do that a lot, and that helps with the final product. I also build in reflections on their own learning. So that engages them to think about, what am I learning and why? Not only for the whole overall course, but on a particular assignment. Where does this fit in to my overall learning? And I think another way that's very engaging for students is to give them the space for some goal setting with their own self-reflections and thinking about, what do I need to do to make sure that I attain those goals? So when I think about this upcoming fall, have you thought about, as we've been spending a little bit of time together at the first part here of our webinar, what changes would you like to see in your classes, in your students, and in your own teaching? So if you had any quick thoughts about that, capture those in the chat box. And Dr. Sadia, if I might ask you again to monitor if anyone has any changes you want to see in your classes, in your students, or in your own teaching. You can choose any one of those.
Okay, Dr. Faiza, Dr. Sabah, Miss Afia, Miss Kiran, would you like to say something? That's really interesting. It's a time to just reveal your experiences with us. Come on, don't be shy.
We are all educators together. We all have changes we'd like to see.
Yes. Would you like to say something?
If not, it's fine if you put it in the chat.
Yeah. Well, in my class, I would like to see that my students should be very responsive. And I really want them to engage in the classroom activities because sometimes I ask questions and related to the lesson in any activity. And I really want that everyone should participate during the class.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
in my teaching, sometimes when I exert more effort and I really want to take my all students on board, so I really want to listen their views that how I'm doing, and especially during the pandemic, since this is online. So, are you satisfied with the material and the information I provide you in the Google Classroom? Are you satisfied about the activities or the quiz? And yeah, the rubric thing is very important, but we really need to learn about it. So
Okay.
yeah, I will definitely consider the designing some effective and productive rubrics in the coming
Mm-hmm.
sessions of my class. And
Wonderful.
and we have some comments, and Miss Samina Safdar, she's our lecturer, and she's saying there should be another presentation for designing rubrics for the student performance. And Ms. Afia is saying, I really want to check everyone all written assignment, and the process is quite challenging, and that's really exhausted as well.
Exactly. And so I want you to think about the fact that we all have changes we probably want to make. And it's good to think about which ones can I accomplish? Which ones do I want to work toward? And I will just say, don't do it by yourself. Find a buddy, find a small group and work together, because that will help to get it accomplished. Okay, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit because I want you to consider how the role of deep reflection can also help your students become much more engaged learners. Reflection is an enormous topic, and I think that we can really improve student engagement through their interactive reflection. Research has indicated that the most effective educators take a deeply reflective approach to their work. And I will add to that I think the most effective learners also take a deeply reflective approach to their work, because their work is being students. So when I think about that, what does it mean to you when I say deep or critical reflection? So just stop and let this go around in your mind. You know, do I reflect on my educational practice every day? What does this mean to reflect, or to reflect deeply? So let's take a little look at that, a small dive into developing deeper reflection, both for ourselves and for our students or for our teacher candidates. There is a researcher by the name of Taggart who has really done some work that has helped us connect with teachers. It's also helped us connect at Mason with our own continuing deep reflection. And Taggart has developed these modes of reflection, and she has a pyramid at the technical level, the contextual level, and the dialectical level. And I'm going to explain what these three are. The idea of this, though, is to incorporate each mode of reflection and to get all the way to the top and to jump off. So let's see what that might look like. So at the technical level, that level is descriptions or observations. So if you ask your students or you ask yourself, what happened or what did you learn today? they probably would give you a quick bulleted list. These are the topics we covered. This is what my professor said. This is what I read. So listing a description, or this is what we talked about. This is what the discussion was about. Okay, you have to start there. That's a foundational level. So that was at the bottom of that mode of reflection, but we need a solid foundation. So that technical mode provides that solid foundation, but I can't stay there. I want to move on to the next level. I want to get to that contextual level of reflection. So whatever I have listed, I want to connect that to something I've read. I want to connect it to theory or other readings, something that connects me with the context of that situation. I want to relate theory to practice and connect actions, something I did in my class, something I want my students to learn about, to research in theory. And so the idea of learner-focused class activities connect to learner-centered instruction. They connect to student engagement, and those practices are developed to promote meaningful learning. So if I'm talking about what I'm doing with my colleagues or reflecting on what happened in class, I am doing that not only because it was a good thing to do, but why was it a good thing to do? Does research clarify and help me analyze what my decisions might have been? So that's a very good level, because that means I'm connecting to the why of the decisions that I make. But I still don't want to leave it there, because I want to go to that next dialectical mode. And I want to really understand what worked or didn't work and why. So if I am using a new rubric and my students didn't engage with that rubric in the way that I had hoped they would, I know that rubrics are really important to use, and I can connect that to theory, and I can connect it to greater student engagement. But if my students didn't quite connect with using a rubric, I wonder why that was. Was that perhaps because the rubric may not have been as clear as I hoped it was? Is it because maybe my students weren't quite up to speed on how they would engage with the rubric, and maybe I need to work with them more? Was it because maybe they also wanted to talk through that rubric with some of their classmates? So I want to go after knowing why or why not something did or didn't work. So I want to look at the consequences of my decisions at this dialectical mode. And I also want to look at, am I meeting the needs of all of my students? Is this, whatever I am doing, is this helping my students, all of them, to be along with me, to learn, to improve? And I want to look for change at this dialectical mode or level. So it's got to have some honest questioning. I mean, we all want to be able to say, oh, that went so well. It was just a perfect lesson. Great. Why? Why was it a wonderful lesson? Why was this lesson the wonderful one when another one may not have been? What was I doing differently? What were my students doing differently? So this dialectical mode is a very important space to be able to find. Okay, so a moment for you to stop and reflect. What's your current thinking with regard to these 3 levels of reflection that Taggart has opened up to us. Had you ever thought about different levels of reflection before? And in thinking for yourself, where might your own reflective practice currently fall within these 3 levels? I'll bet we all reflect very well at the technical level, right?
Yeah.
I bet lots of us really are very versed at that contextual level, but we want to push ourselves to go a step further and strive for that dialectical mode. So this is something that I work with teachers on all the time, and it's something that we want to engage in also along with our students, because that brings us together in an engaged dialogue. So a little bit more on reflection. So from some of our Western scholars, and you may have some scholars in Pakistan also, and I don't know about them, but John Dewey wrote a long, long time ago about the importance of reflection being purposeful. So in my way of thinking, that dialectical level really gets at a deep purposefulness for reflection. Another researcher by the name of Donald Schoen wrote that there were really 2 kinds of reflection. There was reflection in action, that where educators think on their feet. We're in our classrooms. That's what we have to do all the time, right? And so when we reflect in action, those in action reflections are actually enhanced if we have reflected after an action on whatever that action was. And so by making those connections and by thinking purposefully and by thinking at the contextual level and by striving for that dialectical level, our reflections on action can become much richer. And those reflections on action then serve to inform our reflections in action. That was an embedded explanation, but I hope you were able to follow me. Any questions, or would you like to stop?
Dr. Kutsia wanted to ask you a question. She raised a hand. Yes, please.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So reflection is certainly so important. Over the years, particularly in the past 4 years, I have learned from my own practice that reflecting on things alone is certainly very productive. But I think collaborative reflection is really very, very helpful in clarifying our own assumptions, and particularly in moving from seeing knowledge as something very absolute to viewing knowledge as contextual and uncertain. So it is important. Collaborative reflection is certainly very important, and I have found its impact on the epistemological development of my students. I haven't measured it very technically, but students' responses have shown me that collaborative reflection actually works. In fact, I research in the field of environmental education and sustainability education. So for that matter, I applied pedagogies which are transformative, which have transformative potential. And I have experienced that collaborative reflection really helps students to learn about environmental issues and develop some thinking so that they take some actions, pro-environmental actions. So I just wanted to talk about collaborative reflection, effectiveness of collaborative reflection. Yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we spend a lot of time in all of our programs with collective reflection, because we have to gauge our own thoughts against not only what others' thoughts are, but against readings that we carefully select for our students, so that this dialogue becomes a rich learning experience. So we do indeed work on collaborative reflection, or on having a critical friend to help us confront biases, understand some of our assumptions, and be able to work on those, on correcting those. And that's at that dialectical level or mode of reflection, when we are looking to make a difference in the lives of our world, in the lives of our classrooms, in the lives of our fellow researchers. We learn the best on this collective journey together, don't we? So thank you so much for that. So reflection and critical reflection, certainly we reflect and reflect with a critical friend or with our colleagues. But these ideas of refining our own thinking and resituating what we believe within our teaching, reflection is really at the heart of the work that we do. So it does help us consider what's going on in our classrooms through new eyes, and whether that classroom is an online space or face-to-face, or a combination of all of that. We come to see changes in our practice and to gauge the responses of our students to those new approaches, and consider what we can do better to help our students come to that learning so that it's meaningful. So critical reflection has also helped our teachers and our students and us become much more engaged with the teaching and learning cycle, with our students in that cycle with us. It connects our students, so working with them to reflect on their own learning and to gauge their new knowledge against what they have been reading. Those updates, those highly thoughtful writings that our students give us, are also a window into our teaching practice. So we can see our growth and change as educators over time, just as our students can see their growth and change over the course of a semester. So, and this idea in my next to the last bullet, where reflection helps us connect more deeply with our colleagues, and this idea of critical friends and collective reflection is so important. The idea of critical reflection is to make a difference and to delve deeply. We also think of critical reflection in terms of equity and access within the context of our schools and our classrooms. So these three modes of reflection, by looking at those three, that top mode or the dialectical mode is really looking for change. Change in us, change in our students to promote the desired results. So in a way, I think COVID has been a call to action. I think as educators, we are always in the mode of being in a call to action, but this is a very urgent one. And I think COVID has also called us to think about social injustices, the importance of holding international perspectives. We need to be part of the broader world. And so the idea of our purposeful actions for change, so that students do become engaged, so that our fellow colleagues work with us collectively in looking at how we can promote inclusive excellence. by applying rubrics, by engaging our students in their own self-assessments as we lead them and scaffold that. Those aspects are enormously important in the work that we do. So kind of bottom line for us, reflective teaching and critically reflective teaching is evidence-based, because those reflections are data. They're evidence of what students have learned in the classrooms that we facilitate. So we collect data, reflective data, scores on tests being among them, but conversations, individual assignments. We reflect on that evidence to make some informed decisions for our next go round in that particular course or in the next class with our students. And then as a result, changes do emerge by looking at those pieces of data, reflection included, and we make decisions not just on impulse, but on evidence that we have collected from our students. So remember to bring your students in this new idea of instructional approaches that have a more horizontal, a more level playing field, because without engaged students, we're not going to be able to see that full circular potential of empowerment with regard to learning. So I think that in order to reach this dialectical level of reflection, and it's something that I'm always asking myself, have I gone far enough? Is there more that I can see? I want to keep in mind equity and access, learning differences that exist among my students, those learner characteristics. And certainly when I'm working with international audiences, I want to think very carefully about your context as it relates to my context, because there needs to be a trans-adaptation. Because we've been working in certain ways here in the US, I want you to think about new ways and new things that you might try out, but you also need to scaffold that and work with your students so that their voices are part of the work that you do. And so these are merely some new tools that I hope are going to foster some new interaction patterns for all of you. And as you take your own inquiry stance, I hope that you will continue to learn from the research that you are conducting from inquiry, from looking at that dialectical and striving for it within your own classes. So where do we go from here? I think you've already said, you know, this should be better done in a group. So I think you might want to stick with some faculty buddies, form some small critical friends groups, some working groups, and talk through and test out some of your new ideas. Talk about what went well and what didn't go so well, and what might we want to do about that to help add new knowledge and try out some new things. Keep that ongoing. I would say keep that group going, keep meeting and tackling new ideas. And then once you've done that on a more local level, meaning your course or within your department, you can then identify those bigger changes that might be needed. We have to start somewhere, right? So this organic approach seems to be working well. And try out those three modes. Engage in critical reflection, see what it feels like. And just remember that we as university faculty, we love education. And we are learners too. So this teaching and learning is a journey. I have much to learn from you, and I hope you have more that you can learn from my experience. And we all are learners from our students. So that's an important piece for all of us to remember.
I have one
I
thought, Dr. Fox. Since
yes.
peer review is missing in the Pakistani context and in the university system, so how do you think it promotes the ways of the critical reflection on someone's teaching?
Let's see if I've understood your question. So peer review, you said?
Yes, I really wanted someone to come in my class, observe my teaching, and then my colleague can reflect on my teaching. That's missing in the Pakistani context. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm always welcoming that someone should come and observe me and look at my activities. But the faculty is maybe sometime they don't take any interest, they feel shy, and maybe they feel insecure. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the limitation in our context that's not promoting the critical reflection on someone's teaching.
Mm-hmm. I do have some thoughts about that, and I'm wondering if maybe we would want to continue on in a dialogue. I don't want to keep you too long. I'm loving talking with you, but I will say start small. So if you do have, I'll just go back to this little slide where I was thinking, having a small group of critical friends, if there are 3 or 4 of you who want to try out peer review. I do peer reviews all the time with my colleagues, and I always start out the way I do with anything. These are the wonderful things that I'm seeing. Can you? And then I might ask, can you tell me more about this particular thing? Or if I am being observed, I like to ask my observer to look for certain things to see if they feel that I'm doing them to the extent that I think I am. And more than anything, my students are my critical observers, right? So when they write their ending reflections for me, I want to know what has been the most meaningful thing for you in this course. What beyond the facts that you may have learned, what were the activities or what were the approaches that you found the most meaningful for you, and why? So those ideas of that critical lens help me to see, oh, they really liked this, or 5 out of 20 didn't particularly care for this activity or this particular assignment. I wonder why. Maybe I want to ask them, did it come at the wrong time? Was it too detailed? Did it seem like it was too much? I want to know why they felt that it didn't work as well as they wanted it to, or it didn't help them as much. So I think there are different contributors to the peer observation, because our students can certainly contribute to that. You all could even start a new movement with having some
Yeah.
wonderful peer observations, right? You could lead the charge with that. So that was a great thought. Thank you. So I hope you all, after this webinar is all over, will come back together at some point. Dr. Sadia is wonderful to get these things all lined up, but I hope you all will coalesce, will come together and begin to think about what something is that you want to pursue as a result of these many ideas that I have shared with you this morning. So I want to thank you for being such an engaged audience, because you've talked with me. And one of the things about webinars is we don't want them to be a one-way street. We want them to call for questions, to call for dialogue, to help us to think in some different ways. And you've certainly provided some wonderful ideas for me as well. So I do thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Rabika. Dear audience, this is the last moment to ask questions from the speaker. If you have any question, you can directly ask to the speaker or you can write in the chat box. Thank you. Dr. Kutsia, would you like? Yes, please.
It's not a question, actually, just a comment. Actually, I like the question raised by Dr. Sadia, and being a teacher educator, I feel the same way. Over the years, I have learned that reason for not inviting a critical friend in a class is probably that action research is missing in our culture. It is considered a low form of research. So a critical friend is an important part of action research. So because we are not very much engaged in action research, as a result, we do not invite people, and people are not familiar with this concept. They feel threatened that if I'm going to observe someone else, probably others would also come to my class and they are going to observe me. So these are the reasons, because we lack a culture of action research. That is just my view regarding that. Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting perspective. And, here in the United States, action research and qualitative research took a little while to gain a toehold. Narrative inquiry and inquiry started in the UK. And then they gradually, it pretty much simultaneously hit the US. But at our educational research associations, it took years before qualitative research was readily acceptable. So that is also one thought for you. When I had my grant with the UMT faculty there in Lahore, we talked a lot about qualitative research and the role that inquiry, which is another word that we are increasingly using here to talk about action research, it's being in a space of inquiry. So, I think that's something that you all may want to continue to think about, and maybe you could hold your own qualitative action research conference there at the University of Education. You could lead the charge.
Yes. Well, there is another comment. Is it possible to form a critical review or reflection committee in each of the department of university? Any faculty member can volunteer to invite the member of a committee to just come and observe someone's class in terms of teaching methodology or other teaching practices. Yes, that's a good suggestion, Miss Afia. Would you like to say something, Dr. Forbes, on it?
I would think that's wonderful. We are a culture, so it is a culture. It's the development of a new culture. We are a culture in the College of Education of peer review. We certainly do have hierarchies, but as a faculty, our goal is to help new faculty and scaffold their experiences. So I think you can indeed begin to develop a new culture there. But I have one thing that I want to just offer as a suggestion, and that is, if you do that, make sure that you all are talking together and that the word critical reflection or critical friends does not mean criticism.
Yes.
Okay, it really means we are delving into this together, and we are going to bring out the goodness, and we're also going to grow together. And that's a different mindset than being critical. So we would want people to be on that same page with us if we're going to go down that cultural shift.
Yeah. I agree with you. Well, We are just running short of time. We have another session. Thank you so much, Dr. Rabika, for conducting a terrific session. On behalf of University of Education, thank you for conducting a very productive session on responsive learning during COVID-19 and the techniques and the procedures about the reflective practices on someone's teaching. So thank you once again for sharing the wonderful information with us. And I'm looking forward to meeting you again, maybe in the fall semester in October of this year.
Wonderful also to see all of you, and thank you for your engagement with us today. I really do appreciate that. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you so much, dear audience. We have another session. Can you please